Hi, welcome to this segment of Digital Discoveries. In this segment, we're going to be talking about podcasts. And so some of you are thinking, well, what the heck is a podcast? I have no idea what a podcast is. Well, if you have one of these is an iPod Touch, but you could have any kind of MP3 player. If you have an MP3 player, you have the ability to turn it into a learning device. Instead of just a listening to music or watching movies device, you can actually turn this type of device into a learning device. I'm going to talk about that in just a sec. So first of all, what is a podcast? A podcast is an audio or video project that contains some type of information. It's either like a radio show, think of it as kind of like a radio segment or a TV show that you can actually download onto either your computer or onto your portable music device, and you can listen to these. So today we're going to talk about why you'd want to use a podcast, where you'd want to use a podcast, and how to find some podcasts. So let's first of all, to just start where we're going, let's go to the mother of all podcast sites, and that is iTunes. iTunes is a program that most people have on their computers, and right now I have iTunes up here, and most people buy music on iTunes, but we've actually talked in Digital Discoveries before about iTunes University and how you can get lots of free content on that. But actually, there's another place where you can get lots of free content. If you notice when you turn on iTunes, you're going to get this screen across the top. You've got, it says music and movies and TV shows. There's one right there called podcasts, right there at the very top. And that's where we're going to go today. So we want to click on podcasts, and we see what happens when we click on podcasts. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of different podcasts, and each one of those podcasts have episodes in them. So you literally have millions of different episodes of podcasts, and there's podcasts on every single possible topic that you can think of. And as a teacher, you need to know that before you let your students go on something like this, that each podcast, there are podcasts on every single topic that's out there. So you got to be very careful. You got to vet things if you want your students to go find them. But for our teachers, let's talk about podcasts for education. So once we log into iTunes here, and say, for instance, I'm interested in looking at education podcasts, because once I've got them on iTunes, you can load them onto your device, whatever your MP3 player is, just like you'd load music onto your device. So let's go over and look at the categories that are over in podcasts. You notice that there's audio podcasts, there's video podcasts. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you can put a lot more audio podcasts on your MP3 player than you can video podcasts, because video, by definition, just automatically takes up more space. But let's look at some of the categories that are available. The arts, business, comedy, education. There's literally hundreds. In each one of these has hundreds of podcasts available. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. One of the neat things about podcasting is that professionals make podcasts and amateurs make podcasts as well. So let's go ahead and click on education and see where we go. Once we click on education, we go to this interesting, you pop right out to the education site, and the ones that are at the top are the new and noteworthy ones. There's about 20 of them. Let's click on that just to see what's out there. 1 minute Arabic. If I wanted to start learning Arabic, it's there. There's Skeptic Tank. There's 1 minute Dutch. There's things from MIT Labs. There's all different kinds. There's too much to start out with. You're like, I don't know where to go. So let's start looking. Let's narrow it down a little bit. So let's say we're talking about, I don't know, bilingual education. And so we're going to type bilingual education into our search. As soon as we type that in, we get podcasts. And these are all the different podcasts that are in bilingual ed. So I want to click See All. And let's see what happens here. Whoops. So let's go to this one, bilingual education students. So we're going to click on that and see what happens. So there we've got just one podcast. And it was a video segment demonstrates how video and audio podcasts can be used to display the importance of bilingual education. That might be something that I'm interested in. So if I'm interested in it and I want to check it out, I don't have to download it first. I can actually kind of preview it. There's like a little preview button right there. And if you click on that little button where my little
Hello, my
beach
name is
ball is
Mr.
spinning.
Favela. I am a bilingual teacher at Paul
And
C. Moreno.
so there we go.
The
There's like
reason we
something
came
from
up with
Paul
the
Moreno
bilingual book
Elementary.
was because the
Isn't that
students
interesting?
were
That's
sharing
from
with their parents what they were doing at school. Some,
I think
however,
it's one of
were
our schools here in EPISD. So you can actually see there's all different kinds of stuff. So there's all different ones out there. Let's pick another topic. Let's go. I had a hard time. I misspelled bilingual. I know how to spell science, so let's type in science education. Let's see what happens. So let's scroll down. First thing is iTunes U. We already had a segment on iTunes U, so let's talk about podcasts. So here's podcasts that have to do with science education. Now, how would you use this in a classroom setting? Well, there's lots of different ways that you can use it in a classroom setting. You can use it for your own professional development. You can listen to podcasts. You know, one of the things that I do, and I know this is a terribly nerdy thing to do, but I've gotten so tired of morning radio shows on the radio. So I've kind of just substituted listening to the morning radio when I drive to school. I substitute that with listening to a podcast, and the podcast might be on some topic that I'm interested in. I found some very, very interesting podcasts. And one of the neat things about it is I can listen to them at any time of the day. Well, when I'm not working, of course, but when I'm driving, that time when you're driving back and forth to work where you're not really doing anything, you can actually be doing professional development while you're driving back and forth. You can also extend students' learning with podcasts as well. If students aren't getting a concept down, you can actually pull that concept up as a podcast, play it in class, or you can have the students go to a computer and listen to it on their own. If a student finishes an assignment early, you can have them go listen to podcasts about whatever topic you're listening to. I strongly urge you to vet the podcast ahead of time, so it might be a good idea for you to download the podcasts onto your computer before you start assigning them to students, because the students will find some of the weirdest podcasts that are out there. So let's say, for instance, here's one. Here's one called Why, the Science Show. So I click on that one. It's for K-12. And it's a science show for kids. Each week, Dr. Dave Broadbeck answers questions about science from real kids like you. So I'm going to just randomly, why isn't Greenland a continent? So I'm going to click on that one. And so now you want to be careful, because sometimes you'll look at the date on some of these podcasts and you'll say to yourself, well, you know what, that podcast hasn't been updated in a long time, so it must not be good anymore. But sometimes the content is pretty good, and so don't discount something just because it hasn't been updated in a while. On the other hand, you'll see a lot of podcasts where people have started and they've stopped, and so you can kind of say, well, what's that all about? So say, for instance, we're really interested in Dr. Dave Broadbeck's Why, the Science Show for Kids. We're really interested in that. We can actually then start to download them onto our computer. We can put them onto our computer so we don't have to go to iTunes every single time we want to listen to the Why Science Show for Kids. So how would we do that? Well, let's go over to how we would do it. On the button here, you just click subscribe for free. And then you're going to get a question that says, are you sure you want to subscribe? And I say, yeah, I do want to subscribe. So as soon as that happens, you'll start downloading podcasts onto your computer, and you can download as many as you want. There's no limit. You're only limited by the amount of hard drive space that's on your computer. So let's do one more just to recap how to get some podcasts and where you can get them from. First thing you need to do when you turn on iTunes is click on to the iTunes Store. When you go to the iTunes Store, you click on the section that says Podcasts. Click on Podcasts there. You're going to get a whole bunch of podcasts. We're going to go over to education or science or whatever our particular topic is. Click on science, or we'll click on education, and say, for instance, we're interested in this one, We Teach. And if we're really interested in keeping it, we've vetted it, we've looked at it, Then we hit, I want to subscribe to this for free. Once I subscribe for it, it asks, are you sure you want to? And I say, yeah, I do. And then what happens is then have that show in my on my computer. So it'll download, and then every time once I've subscribed, every time a new episode comes up, it automatically gets put on my computer. I don't have to download it every single time. So this is a great way to extend learning beyond the classroom. It's a great way for you to do professional development. It's a great way for you to extend what's taking place in your professional learning communities. So before we leave, I want to ask you this one question. What podcasts can you use with your students to extend the learning in your classroom beyond just that school day? Thanks for joining me for this episode of Digital Discovery. We'll see you next time.